Do you think that Boris Johnson and the possibility of a hard Brexit will have a serious effect on NATO's cohesion and its ability to conduct future operations?
Brexit will change UK's relationship to the European Union. And of course, whether it's a hard Brexit or a negotiated deal will affect how Brexit will change UK's relationship to the European Union. But Brexit will not change UK's relationship to NATO. So again, Brexit is an important issue, and how Brexit happens is of course important for the United Kingdom and for EU. But it doesn't change UK's relationship to NATO, and I'm certain that regardless of how Brexit happens or when and so on, the United Kingdom will remain a very important key NATO ally. You have to remember that the United Kingdom is the biggest military, or they have the biggest defense budget in Europe, the second largest in the alliance after the United States. They contribute key capabilities to NATO, and they lead all of the battle groups in the Baltics, and they are in Afghanistan. They are important for NATO in many ways. If anything, I think that Brexit will make NATO even more important as a platform for bringing European allies together, and North America and European allies together, because then NATO will be the framework that includes also the United Kingdom and some other European allies which are not members of EU, like for instance Iceland and Norway. Two nice countries with fjords.
Yeah, please.
Thanks for being here. You mentioned before that great power competition is one of the biggest challenges facing the international system. Hence, I want to ask you, do you see a future where the US and China can coexist bilaterally within the international system?
Yes, I do that, and I think we all should strive for that to happen. I think that's one of the reasons why we now are assessing and analyzing the consequences of the rise of China. And as I said, there are some opportunities. The economic rise of China is a big market, is a big economic opportunity for all our countries, and I know that New Zealand, as many European, as all European countries, we are trading. We have a lot of many companies working closely with China. So the rise of China has some opportunities, but also some challenges. They are investing in new modern military capabilities. We see what they do in the South China Sea. So therefore we need to find a way to deal with that. But of course the reason why we do that is to make sure that we can continue to live peacefully. And therefore, yes, I believe it's possible to coexist in a peaceful way.
Thank you. Yeah,
Brent from the Ministry of Business Innovation and Employment. You've talked about internal problems and external problems relating to Iran and Russia. My question is, it's more of a discussion point. Can you comment more on Turkey and what type of strain comes from, for example, Turkey buying defense weapons from Russia when there's a NATO program, or interchangeability with weapons, for example, and the differing approaches between the Kurds, for example, between the US, Syria, etc.?
The Turkish decision to acquire the Russian air defense system S-400 is a Turkish decision, and it's a national decision, and in NATO there is a decision. It's up to each and every NATO ally to decide what kind of equipment they acquire. Having said that, I am concerned about the consequences of the Turkish decision. Of course, for NATO, what matters is what we call interoperability, and especially when it comes to air defense, it is important to make sure that the different air defense systems can work together, that they can have integrated radar picture, that they can operate together, that they are linked. And of course, a Russian system will not be integrated into the integrated air and missile defense system we already have in Europe. Turkey have other capabilities, like their fighter jets or radars and so on, which already are integrated into NATO's integrated air and missile defense. But the new Turkish system, the S-400, will not be integrated. I welcome the fact that Turkey is also now looking into or discussing with the United States the possibility of buying Patriot, which is another system, and of course interoperable with NATO, it's a US system. And they're also in dialogue with France and Italy about the possibility of buying something called SAMP-T, which is a French-Italian air defense system. On top of that, it is important to remember that NATO already augments the air defenses of Turkey with the deployment of one Patriot battery and one SAM-T battery in Turkey. So, yes, you are right, this is an example where we see disagreement, but Turkish contribution to NATO runs much deeper, and it's about much more than S-400. Again, I'm not saying it's a minor issue, but I'm saying that Turkish contribution to NATO is much more than the issues related to the S-400. Which brings me then to the second part of your question. Turkey is and has been extremely important in fighting terrorism. We have to remember that not so many months ago, Daesh or ISIS controlled the territory as big as the United Kingdom in Iraq and Syria. They controlled big cities like Mosul, Raqqa, and they were, also a few years ago, they were threatening Baghdad. And they controlled a population around 8 million people. So now they have lost all the control over territory. I'm not saying that ISIS doesn't exist, they're still there on the ground. And there are also in other countries, like for instance, they're trying to get a foothold in Afghanistan and North Africa and elsewhere. But the caliphate, the physical territory they controlled recently, they have lost, which is a big achievement. And that achievement has been possible not least because of Turkey. Infrastructure, support, the border. So Turkey plays an important role, and that's important for NATO, for the global coalition to defeat Daesh. There are some disagreements again between the United States and Turkey on the role of some of the groups in northern Syria. NATO is part of the global coalition. We provide support to the global coalition to defeat Daesh. We are not on the ground in northern Syria, but we welcome again that Turkey and the United States are talking about how to deal with the specific situation in northern Syria.
Sean.
You've said that NATO's full mission is to defend alliance members against any attack. What role does or should NATO play against a cyber attack, particularly election interference, where military physical power is less relevant?
We have decided that a cyber attack can trigger Article 5. Meaning that the cyber attack can trigger the collective defense clause of NATO, because we regard cyber attack as potentially as damaging as a conventional attack. We have also decided that cyber is now a military domain. We have established operational center for cybers. We are establishing cyber as a domain alongside air, sea, and land. So the answer is we will respond as an alliance collectively if there is a, as I say, serious attack on a NATO ally. We have that provision, we have that possibility. We do that if we deem that necessary. We don't have to respond in cyber. We will respond the way we find the right way to respond. So that's the easy part of the answer. The difficult part of the answer is that, does that mean that we will trigger the collective defense clause to any cyber attack? No. Because it has to be what we call above the threshold Article 5. And that's a question, that's at the end of the day a political issue. When is an attack so serious that we trigger the collective defense clause of the alliance? And we will never give any potential adversary the benefit of defining that exactly. But they just have to know that at some stage we will trigger the collective defense clause and respond. And we also developed what we call sovereign national cyber effects, which is also called offensive cyber. Something which NATO allies have used, for instance, against Daesh. Offensive cyber has been extremely important in fighting Daesh. We have also their systems, their networks. But the problem with cyber is that you have a lot of aggressive activities which are, not above the threshold of triggering the full response from the full alliance, but they are still serious. So then we deal with them by increasing the resilience of our systems, by improving the awareness of all our nations, just to make them aware of the risks, by sharing best practices, and by conducting big exercises. So we help each other also when it comes to cyber attacks below Article 5, but we have also the potential to trigger Article 5 if we deem that necessary.
Hi. So my question is looking towards NATO's future. So long term, given the shifting power balance and the tactics that China has already employed, how do you see that affecting NATO countries and their relationship within NATO?
NATO is the most successful alliance in the history. And we are the most successful alliance in history for two reasons. Partly because we have been able to be united despite disagreements. The other reason why we are the most successful alliance in history is that we have been able to change when the world is changing. So, as I said, for 40 years we did collective defense in Europe. Then the Cold War ended, and we went beyond our borders. We managed crisis beyond our borders in the Balkans, in Afghanistan, and elsewhere. Now we see more great power competition. We see that several countries are investing in modern, high-end military capabilities. We see a more unpredictable, uncertain world, and part of the shifting global balance of power which you refer to is also, that's part of that picture. And all of that is the reason why NATO again is changing. We have now implemented the biggest reinforcement of our collective defense since the end of the Cold War. For many, many years, NATO allies reduced defense spending because tensions went down, threats went down. And it's quite natural then that when you live in a less uncertain world with reduced tensions, then we invest less in defense. But the strength of NATO is that when tensions are going up and when challenges are increasing, then we are investing more. So NATO is now investing much more in defense than we did a few years ago. And I'm in a way surprised that I haven't had more questions about defense spending, because that's one of the big issues. Because I have told many audiences before that I'm a politician, and I know that most politicians, they prefer to spend money on something else than defense. They want to spend money on education, health, whatever, or infrastructure. But now when tensions are going up, then we need to invest more, and NATO allies are doing exactly that. That also includes the need for developing technology to deal with the new challenges we see. And the good thing is that we are now investing also more in developing technology. So this is not specifically related to one specific country, but it's making NATO stronger, increasing the readiness of forces, acquiring new capabilities, investing in modern technology, maintains NATO as by far the biggest alliance and the strongest alliance in history. As long as we are together, we are 50% of the world's GDP, economic might, and 50% of the world's military might. So if we are united, then we are by far the strongest power in the world.
We are almost out of time, so what I'm going to do is just take a couple of questions, maybe one from up there, one from down there, and one from over here, and get the Secretary General to respond to them together. So, Gerald.
Thank you very much. Gerald, the former Director of the Institute of International Affairs. You mentioned the expansion of NATO. At the time of the breakup of the Soviet Union, Gorbachev was given an assurance that NATO would not increase its membership, as my understanding. As you know, Russia has extreme sensitivity about its borders, national security, etc. China, but particularly in NATO as well. Are you increasing your diplomatic discussions with Moscow over that increase, or have you just said, there it is, we've decided to go ahead and expand?
Okay, thank you. And then this gentleman here.
Thank you for being here. You mentioned some of the challenges that both NATO and New Zealand are facing. Do you think there's some room to increase cooperation between both NATO and New Zealand in the future? And if so, where would you like to see this happen?
And then finally, because we've been underrepresented in gender equality with questions, I'm going to give this last question to this lady here, please.
I mean, you just asked the question I was about to ask.
Was there one up there as well? No, and I've got... Please, yes, here.
Hi. I want to ask that how do you think that US peace talks with Taliban would be beneficial for political stability in Afghanistan, and it would not undermine the democratization process in Afghanistan, because Taliban are not agreed to talk with the political government of Ashraf Ghani in Afghanistan, and women and minorities also have concern about the mainstreaming of Taliban back in Afghanistan political process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. First about NATO expansion. So first of all, NATO never gave any guarantee to Gorbachev, to any Soviet leader, that NATO was not going to have new members. Second, just the idea that, some big allies are going to give that kind of guarantee is in a way violating some very basic principles. So no such guarantee was given. Second, if it would have been given, it would be completely wrong to give it. Because what we then are saying is that Russia has a right to decide what small neighbors can do or not do. And I'm not saying that you said, but people say it's very provoking for Russia that Latvia has decided to become a member of NATO. I mean, that's the idea that Latvia cannot do what they want to do because they're a neighbor of Russia. And that's the old-fashioned thinking about big powers' right to decide what small neighbors can do. It's a sphere of influence. And there are a lot of people also in our own countries with things like that. It's a bit, they understand Russia is provoked. I know, and actually it violates some really fundamental principles for how nations should live together in a peaceful way. Nations have the right to choose their own path, including what kind of security arrangements they want to be part of. That's not only something I say, but that's actually enshrined in the Helsinki Final Act, which also Russia has signed. Therefore, when we have good friends and allies like Sweden, not allies, but good friends and partners like Sweden, and they have decided not to become a member of NATO, and I totally respect that. But we also have friends and soon allies like North Macedonia who would like to become a member, and then I accept that. It's for Sweden to decide whether they want to be a member or not, and it's for North Macedonia to decide, or Montenegro to decide. It's not for Russia to decide what North Macedonia or Sweden should do, or Latvia. If you for 1 second accept that, then you're back to a world which, big powers decided the future of small powers. And we don't want that world. And I am from a small country bordering Russia. And when we joined NATO in 1949, Russia didn't like that. But if Clement Attlee, who was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and Truman, President of the United States, said, "Oh, Norway, that will provoke Russia, so Norway has to stay outside of NATO," that would violate the sovereignty of Norway. So, just the idea that some men in a dark room should decide what Latvia could do or not do is a provocation. That's the provocation. Not that Latvia, through a democratic process, or Poland or Hungary or Montenegro, through a democratic process, decided to join NATO. Yeah. So, it's wrong, and if it was right, it was still wrong. Yeah. If you understand what I mean. Yeah. Then, cooperation with New Zealand. I think there's a great potential for more cooperation with New Zealand. First of all, we work with New Zealand in many different areas, but I think it's a potential for working more together when it comes to fighting terrorism in many different ways. Because this is partly about military operations, as we have in Afghanistan, in Iraq, fighting Daesh, Al-Qaeda and so on, which is important. I mean, it is extremely important that we have made the progress we have made against Daesh, and that didn't come without the use of military power. But we know, you know, that to fight terrorism requires more than military power. It requires intelligence, police, but also building attitudes, defending values, looking into our own societies. More and more terrorism is homegrown. And to understand how that works, understand how we can make sure that we don't have terrorists like the perpetrator in Christchurch or the perpetrator in Norway. It's not NATO's main task, but it is extremely important as part of the broader efforts to fight terrorism. And to stand up for our values, open, democratic, tolerant societies. It's exactly those societies that terrorists attacks, and how we can work together defending them. And I think New Zealand has been outstanding in the way you have stood up for those values. So the way New Zealand dealt with the terrorist attacks in Christchurch has inspired people all over the world. And I commend you for the way you reacted. So we can learn from each other in the way we deal with and fight terrorism. Cyber, we can work together with New Zealand. We can work together with New Zealand on gender issues. You know that women are often very vulnerable in armed conflicts. Gender issues are extremely important, and we can again work together with New Zealand on those. Then on Taliban, so we welcome and we closely consult and discuss with the United States and Ambassador Khalilzad on the ongoing dialogue with Taliban. NATO is present in Afghanistan to create the conditions for a negotiated peaceful solution. Therefore, we welcome that now there are talks. But it is extremely important that what we are negotiating now, or what Khalid is now negotiating with the Taliban, is not a leave deal, it is a peace deal. Meaning that it is a deal where we have to make sure that we preserve the gains we have made in Afghanistan, partly about making sure that Afghanistan doesn't once again become a safe haven for international terrorists, because that's not only a problem for the Afghans, but it's also a problem for us. We are in Afghanistan to protect ourselves, also meaning NATO allied countries or New Zealand or other partner nations. Second, we need to do as much as we can to preserve the gains we have made when it comes to social and economic progress, not least the rights of women in Afghanistan. Therefore, we need an inter-Afghan dialogue, and I know that the United States, Ambassador Khalid, they are extremely focused on establishing the framework, the conditions for inter-Afghan dialogue, and hopefully we will have that as soon as possible, because there can be no lasting peace in Afghanistan without, of course, the Afghan-owned process, where also the Afghan government has to be part of that. Nothing is agreed before everything is agreed, but I think it's right to say that we are closer to a negotiated solution in Afghanistan now than we have been for many, many years, or ever have been. That is a great achievement. We will support that. We went into Afghanistan together, the United States and NATO allies and partners like New Zealand. We will make decisions of future presence there together, and when the time is right, we will also leave together. But we will and have to make sure that Afghanistan doesn't once again become a safe haven for international terrorism, and that we make sure that the gains we have made, not least for women, are preserved. Because this has been a sacrifice which has been made by hundreds of thousands of troops which have served there for decades, including many troops from New Zealand, and also some of them have paid the ultimate price. So I think we owe them that we make sure that we preserve the gains we have made together. Thank you.